Blessed be everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of Black Magic Talk. We have a very special guest with us today, Eirik Westcoat. Is that how you say it?
Westcoat.
Westcoat, excuse me. I will have to change that then. I apologize. Um, yeah, so we're going to talk to him for about an hour, and then we're going to do Matt and I will do a little bit of a moon ritual because it is the full moon. It's July 21st, and today is the new moon. So, without further ado, Eirik, tell us all about yourself, how you got on your path, and we'll just ask you questions from there.
Oh, thank you. Yes, as you said, my name's Eirik Westcoat. Let's see, what have I been up to? Let's see, been into runes and esotericism for, let's see, and like heathenry, Alcitru, and all this for maybe about around 20 years-ish. And let's see, and more recently, I went through a grad school program in an MA program in Iceland, and then in Norway, and then also a PhD in Iceland with things like for Viking medieval Norse studies, and then Icelandic literature.
Tell us about that literature. So, what is the Icelandic literature that you sort of studied?
Okay, well, most specifically for my PhD, I focused on um, Icelandic folk tales about poets who do magic through improvised poetry. And they call these craftaskalds.
And how do they do? That sounds fascinating. How do they do their magic then?
Okay, it just turns out, I guess, for an example, some of these tales go, they'll be faced with some kind of particular problem or some situation that requires a sudden response, whether it's they see some fox attacking the sheep, or some stingy merchant crosses the.
Interrupt, but tell us more about how you got on your path.
Okay, I mean, more on the path. Okay, I have to be a little more specific on that.
Like, how did you start? Like, what made you want to become or be on the path that you are now? Did something spark your interest? Have you ever, did you,
Oh.
I mean, has this path been since you were young? Like, how, take us through the history of your path. How did you get on it?
Okay. Yeah, to make the short version of some of the early stuff, I wouldn't say I was from when I was very young. I think it really started when I was in college the first time, I only discovered the existence of like paganism, broadly speaking, when I was a senior in college. And then I guess that's where it got slowly started shifting toward, I guess, starts out with things like Wicca and that, but later I start shifting over toward heathenry, and I like to get an interest in the runes, and eventually the runes and heathenry drag me further over into things like Viking Norse and all the early Germanic stuff, and further into the runes. And then this was also ultimately what led to the inspiration to my graduate studies, to pursue a lot of the, I guess, what we broadly called Viking and medieval Norse topics in greater depth. And from there, I also zeroed in onto a particular interest on poets and poetry in the like Old Norse and Germanic traditions.
Can you read the ruins?
Yes.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I've never really studied them, but do they have classes and stuff when it comes to, how to read the runes and how to kind of like a tarot? Would they have like a runes class for that?
Well, let's see. I suppose it means if you mean read the runes as in what they say, and like what old, like ancient monuments or like buried treasures might have written on them. There are classes that do that. I took academic runology classes during my graduate studies, but I would say as far as, we they don't discuss the class. These kind of academic runology doesn't discuss like using runes as divination tools today, because very surprisingly, although there's a lot of tantalizing hints in some places in lore, we don't have any actual finds of, we don't have physical evidence of the runes being used for divination in older times. It seems likely, but there's we don't have any little sets of like rune lots the way they found like little sets of like chessmen or toffle pieces, for instance.
So how would you use the runes, or how did they use them back in the older days?
Let's see. I guess toward the very beginning, it is hard to be completely sure because a lot of the inscriptions are very terse, and we don't get a lot of what we expected. I guess one of the arguments for more like magical symbolic intent is because in the early inscriptions, we're talking the early Elder Futhark period, we do not find any kind of like mercantile or economic inscriptions. There's no like, there's no inventory records or bills of exchange or business communication. There's none of that in the earliest period.
So would you classify yourself as pagan or Wiccan or maybe both, or maybe you take a traditional path, or what would you classify yourself?
Well, let's see. I'm a heathen, Odian Alcitru.
Okay. What made you want to follow Odin? He's an interesting topic and very well respected, of course, among the gods. So like, what made you get into wanting to follow Odin?
Well, I think that would be just like a narrowing focus on, of course, things that Odin is strongly associated with. Those being, in my case, mainly poetry and the runes. So in this case, Odin, of course, in the Norse tradition, Odin being the high god of both of those subjects. So for, I guess,
And
me, it would be kind of inevitable that I end up following Odin.
mm, how much do you write poetry, or just you mostly read it, or and tell us about your poetry that you write.
I've been writing poetry in the traditional Germanic alliterative styles for, yes, a little bit over 13 years at this point, going on nearly 14 years.
That's great.
This is,
Um,
I would say, this is the kind of alliterative poetry that we find in things, for instance, such as like the Poetic Edda, like Beowulf, and the older rune poems.
oh, that's great. Um, I'm not much of a poet myself. I have a lot of trouble with rhyming. um, so I mean that's really interesting. Um, do you have a favorite poetry or a favorite poet? And then do you have a favorite poem? Maybe the one that you wrote or that someone else wrote.
Okay, well, I would say to start with, favorite poems from, I guess, some of the traditional works. I can't claim that I've narrowed it down to anything, a specific favorite poem or poet. There's a lot of short verses I do like here and there. Well, let's see. I think probably some of my most favorite poetry, or at least for me, the most significant poetry, is parts of the Havamal, especially where it talks about Odin winning the runes. And then other favorite poetry, I guess, I particularly like the Old English rune poem. And let's see, I guess maybe some of the other, the more known poets, let's see, like for instance, Egil Skotla Grimson, and then there's the various poets I studied in my PhD work, who had a lot of short verses in these craft skulled folk tales. But I would say, if you want a favorite poem of mine that I've written, that would be one of my more recent poems, which I call the American English rune poem, created to go with the American Futhark I recently developed.
And why is that your favorite?
Okay, I would say that this, let's see, I think, why was I looking? That I think part of that would have to do, let's see, favorite, this is certainly one of the poems I've spent the most time revising and working on. And certainly in its form, like, and I guess and like, yeah, there's that. And at least this is, I find, in many ways, kind of an inspiring poem for my own work as a way to connect with like, I guess my way of connecting with runes is through poetry. And so this so that's, I guess, for like a poem like this is my primary means, is my, I guess, the main means by which I connect to the runes. There would be additional means, of course, with maybe their sounds and certain ideas about them. But for me, connecting through the runes through a poetic stanza is at the top of the list. And I feel that, I think, in terms of poetry, this is a lot of it is some of my I feel it's some of my best work, at least certainly in terms of that kind of genre of like runes as like rune poems as gnomic verses. So this is I've written a number of different takes on rune poems, and I would say that this, of course, would be my best one so far.
So is this about runes, or is it more about, like, how would you describe your poem is about, or like, what do you talk about the most in your poem?
Okay, well, it's 33 stanzas, 4 lines each, as what I consider a guide to the esoteric meanings of these particular runes. So I guess it's so in other words, it is all very short stuff. It's not longer narrative. I have other poems in which I've done longer, sustained narrative. But this is definitely a kind of an exercise in many cases, brevity and how much can be fit into like 4 lines and have it be done well.
Do you like doing anything divination wise? I know you said that the runes, I mean, there's no evidence that we've used runes in the past for divination. Is there any kind of other divination tool that you like to use you personally?
Well, I do use runes for that today.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, I guess, I think, yeah, just to hopefully make a few final touches on the whole historical academic case for it. Most heathens are probably familiar with, there's a description in the writings of the Roman historian Tacitus about a lot casting ritual that he reported for the Germanic peoples, and this has been, the text has been beaten to death. He uses a particular Latin word, noti, to refer to what these Germanic peoples inscribe on slips of wood. And there's endless academic debate about whether these noti are actually runes or if they something else. And I think, yeah, this has been beaten to death. I don't really find it an interesting discussion anymore, because what it comes down to is if we want to adapt this particular ritual to use it today, the runes are the only good guess we have for what those symbols are. So that's the only thing we have that we can use today to duplicate that ritual, is the runes. Now, if someone comes up with an interesting argument for like some other set of symbols that could have realistically been on these slips of wood in like the 1st century of the Common Era, I'd be really glad to hear it. I think it would be an interesting idea, but so far nobody has ever attempted to like propose even anything resembling an alternative to runes for that ritual.
Fair enough. All right. So I'm going to give it over to my co-host, Matt Collins, and he'll ask you questions from here. But very interesting stuff, guys. I mean, this is really good stuff. So pay attention.
And I mean, if the runes work for divination, why wouldn't we use them, right?
Yes.
And so why did you think it's so important? I've been studying the American Futharch for at least a month or something since I know you were going to come on. How could you explain to people why you thought it was important that you did this?
Okay, I think there's a couple angles of attack for this question. Okay, let's see. I'll start with, okay, first I'll say with kind of getting back to, in a sense of revitalizing the tradition for today. In a way, making the runes more like what they were originally. So for the very first rune masters of the Elder Futhark who created the system, they had, the rune names were all meaningful words in the language they actually spoke at that time. Of course, and now I certainly in my history as a heathen, I've certainly been as guilty of that as anyone else. But I think what so that was one of the things that inspired me for the American Futharch, an opportunity to really, I can turn that around and get that back to having meaningful names in the living language that one speaks for the runes. And then closely related to that, and especially for all the like purposes of magic and so forth, is all the runes representing sounds in our modern language. There's a lot of approaches to using the Elder Futhark for magic. They'll have you like make the sounds of these runes, and I guess there's two problems with that. Number one, they're not precisely the sounds of our modern language, and number two, in a number of them, we're not really getting the sounds correct. What we're actually doing is substituting what the closest thing in modern English is. Some of the examples, for instance, like runes like Fehu, Berkano, and let's see, yeah, those two in particular, and Gabo. And the sounds there, like we think of them as close to modern English sounds for F and B and the letter G, but they're not quite. There's certainly academic arguments that the actual sounds they had back then are a little bit different. So we're just substituting something close, and I guess that works as well. It does, but so I figure also like, yeah, why worry about substitutions? You can instead take the modern language, use the sounds as they are, and for which case, one of the bonuses of that, there's never any worry about whether you're getting the sounds right. So this is also an idea to, in other words, get back to using magical systems that make use of the modern living language, which is if the first rune master of the Elder Futhark were chanting the runes for magic, they would, of course, chanted sounds in the languages they spoke.
And a lot of people, they think it's, well, they don't understand that it's already happened before, like with the extended Anglo-Saxon Futhark. So it's nothing new that the runes should change due to language.
Yes.
Because I was looking on your website, and for example, the word has wouldn't end with the letter S, really. It would be a Z sound. Mm-hmm. So I guess, how did you go about, I'm sure there had to be a big process in figuring all that out. As far as like what letters should go to what sounds. I know you're quite a linguist.
Okay, fairly. Okay, so I guess what sound goes to what particular rune stave? There was in this case, I think I balanced a number of different, I would say, interests or let's see, ways of approaching the problem. A number of considerations. There's like, for instance, the older rune names. How did those evolve into the modern language is one consideration. And then another one is like the shapes that were used for the various runes. Do the shapes, how do they connect to those? Do they have any particular meanings? And then there's also like rune poem stanzas. For instance, in this case, there's one of the late editions in the old Anglo-Saxon or Old English rune poem. It's called ER. This is sometimes interpreted variously as serpent. Okay, and it talks in its rune poem stanza talks about it's some kind of river fish that takes its food on land, but that has a fair home where it lives in happiness. Is one of the things the poetic stanza mentioned. And so that, and on that particular basis, it is not a coincidence that I've used that particular shape for the rune name village in the American Futharch. So I see there a connection between a happy dwelling.
And some people argue that might be beaver or eel, I've heard, or dragon. I'm not sure how right that could be, but.
Yeah, I think I've heard the ones on beaver and like eel. I think I've heard beaver and eel mentioned. I mean, I think in terms of the literal meaning of the stanza, beaver is perhaps that makes a lot of sense. But I think ultimately, I guess for my adaptation of the various staves to the modern American Futharch is that it doesn't ultimately, we don't have to ultimately decide what kind of animal that was. Certainly, I'm not attempting to I don't attempt to make a judgment on what kind of animal that was for anything in the American Futharch, for instance.
Yeah, because there's no way to really be sure.
Yeah, I guess that was an example. If I say there's for any of the staves, there will be there's a connection somewhere or other to something for how it got adapted. Many of the connections are very straightforward, like the hail. The stave for hail, of course, comes from the Old English word that also means the little white rocks that fall out of the sky in thunderstorms, for instance.
And the shape is pretty much the same.
Yes.
And how did you go about the ordering of the shapes in the American Futharch?
Okay, for the ordering, I started with taking the Anglo-Saxon Futhorc and, as much as possible at the beginning, following the stave shapes and their order, and which was maintained through the first 24. Same stave shapes, same order for the first 24. Some of the names are different from the evolution, and then when it gets to when starting to the fourth et, this necessitated some differences, because in the Old English, or in the Anglo-Saxon Futhorc, the fourth et starts with the rune ak, which became the modern English oak. And let's see, I guess given the linguistics I was following for this, there was really no particular way to repurpose that particular stave shape to use it for anything else that I had left to give sound values to. So the Old English stave form for ak is not in the modern American Futharch, because you have there's a lot of vowel. There's the mix of vowel and consonant runes from the Old English to the modern American English, it changes a bit. And so then I guess and I went through the rest of them to the most part, keeping many of the stave forms that could be reused for things.
Yeah, but there's no reason to have ak again when you've already got the sound.
Yes, the sound in this case, the ak sound, or at least in modern English, is like os, which is already in the fourth row, because those two runes were different in Old English, their sounds, but the sounds, at least in American English, have kind of merged again. Then, of course, the Old English name ak turned into oak, and that vowel is actually two sounds, and so I represent it with two runes instead of one. So that was another key principle, was that each rune should represent a single sound instead of being two sounds.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense, I think. I'm still learning, definitely, because it takes a while. But how important was it for you to be familiar with the other languages in creating the American Futharch?
Let's say, I feel like certainly my familiarity with Old Norse and my familiarity with the older runic systems, like the Younger Futharch, Anglo-Saxon, Elder Futharch, I feel this was certainly helpful. And so that gave me a good knowledge of what these particular, what each of the runes, what sounds each of the runes had in each of those Futharchs, which I think was that was very helpful for figuring out how to adapt them to today's language. But I would say, as far as the other than just say the rune names, I would say probably my knowledge of Old English was probably drawn on most. I mean, Old Norse in this particular project, Old Norse less so, because of course Old Norse isn't in the it's not in the line of descent here. I see the American Futharch as a reform of the Anglo-Saxon Futhorc, which then goes back to the Elder Futharch, and like Old Norse is like a side branch on this. So the younger Futharch, although interesting in its own right, does not have as much relevance because it's not in the direct family tree for this project.
Because that would be more Icelandic language.
Yes. Yeah, certainly, and those in perhaps maybe Iceland or the other Scandinavian countries, who if they were perhaps adapting a Futhark to their modern language, they would be looking at the younger Futhark a lot, and they have well, that's quite an interesting. Well, that's quite an interesting tradition they would have to look at for there. Mm-hmm.
And how important do you think it would be for them to do that? How much has their language changed as compared to American and the Anglo-Saxon for them?
Let's see. I would say, yeah, their language. I feel that their language has changed more. I mean, okay, yeah, some people, in some ways, I mean, a lot of people will try to tell you that like Icelandic hasn't really changed in 1,000 years, and that's not exactly true. The pronunciation of Icelandic has changed a bit. But what also happened is that in the orthography or the way it was written, like started to change, but like deliberate reforms were made to cover over this and kind of like erase the changes in certain ways. So, like an example, you know, one I guess like at least with the folktale stuff I was looking at, the first person pronoun, the word meaning I in the language. In modern Icelandic, it's pronounced jeg. And in Norway, it's spelled J-E-G, like meaning yai. And in like Iceland, it's spelled, well, in Iceland, it's just spelled with a long E and then a G, because that was like a spelling standard they papered over it. If you look in, say, early 1900s or late 1800s, people in Iceland are spelling jeg with J-E-G. So they're starting to use a spelling that more reflects the pronunciation. But then like spelling reforms, that's an example of one thing where they kind of erased it over with a spelling reform so that its spelling more resembles the Old Norse. I mean, they didn't do this like perfectly with everything. There are distinctive, certainly spelling changes that did get through and are kept. Like say that like the conjunction and, they use Old Norse had ok, and they use og in modern language, and the spelling differences there with the K versus the G. So I mean, they didn't paper over everything, but yeah, some things did get. Yeah, it is a bit papered over. So it more maintains the spelling of the older language than necessarily how it sounded.
Interesting.
But then I would point with English, the sound changes. I feel like, and some of those are very different. Like, I don't want to go too off into the details, but then there's like what we have is certain when we see things like in Icelandic, like the letters, say like the letter D as in dog or T as in tear. Those have kind of changed a little in Icelandic, and various other consonants changed. Without trying to explain all the examples, the point I would make is that a lot of the consonants in English from the Old English, they didn't change as much. We still have a lot of let's see, yeah, we still have a lot of a lot of the same consonants that still existed. Like for instance, the sound we associate with the letter W, say it like at the beginning of my last name, Westcoat, or in the beginning like the word win. That particular W sound has been in English language for like, you know, it goes all the way back to Proto-Germanic period. Other languages lose I think we're just about the only Germanic language that still retains that sound. It gets lost in the other ones, for instance. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not certain whether or not Dutch still has it off the top of my head, but yeah, and so yeah, the consonant inventory in English, we kept in many ways a lot of the old consonants or things similar to them, and we just added more consonants. And the vowels, they shifted around, but they didn't really get too out there or strange in any way.
And I noticed on your website that I'm not that in the know about this, but you mentioned how Latin comes into play with the American Futhark and why we needed different letters.
Okay. Remind me again exactly the Latin part.
says on their website, no Latinate lunacies like the letters Q or Z. All the sounds are only the sounds needed for the American.
Yes. Okay, yes, that one. Okay, yeah, we see. This was another thing that happened. Like even in the Old English, in the runes for that time, we see the Anglo-Saxon Futhorc gets runes for Q and X, and this to my mind, this is clearly a Latinate influence. The scribes are trying, I guess whatever, and these are probably learned Christian churchmen, are like slowly making adaptations to the system to make it more like the Latin alphabet, because really there's no fundamental linguistic need for either the either Querth or for like a Q or an X rune in the system. And this is an example I would say, bringing back to the beginning, because like in the Elder Futhark at the near the beginning of the Common Era, when they learned about writing from Latins, the Latin people the Romans had Q and X letters then, but they decided they didn't need the Q and X for the Elder Futhark. And then around maybe some like 1,000 years later, give or take, now with the churchmen, then it's kind of the irony. Now the churchmen are importing the Q and X when the original tradition saw no need for them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that the end of the extended Anglo-Saxon is very Christian influenced. I love how you in Eagle's Mead tie the Grail mysteries and kind of from a heathen perspective.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that was certainly those were some of my favorite poems in Eagle's Mead. There's a lot of them, but I think the Grail, I guess what I titled the Grail Slam is, I think, some of my favorites there, because this was one of my earliest major forays into kind of a mythological synthesis of the Grail mysteries from a multi-pagan tradition, like a cross-traditional synthesis for this. Kind of a synthesis of these Grail mysteries to like transcend the individual religions they're associated with.
Yeah, and I find that so important because there's not many sources to pull from if you're into the Anglo-Saxon runes. But so anyone that's interested, you should definitely pick up a copy of Eagle's Mead, because I was just reading the end of that today, page 290, talking about the Grail mysteries. Let's see here. Yeah, the ideal in the story of the Grail. And whom does the story of the Grail serve? The chivalric ideals communicated in the romances of the Grail. What led you to make that association, or
Okay, that particular essay, that was I guess it came out of interest in I think Grail Mysteries at the time. Like, give me a moment to remember that one. Let's see. I guess I was interested in, I guess, chivalric ideals at the time, and that essay was a class essay for a course I was taking in the first semester of my MA program in 2014 in Iceland. We were, as I guess one of the electives, there was other courses, like the core courses on like Old Norse stuff and like literature, and I decided to add in one of the electives on the medieval romances of Chrétien de Troyes. And so that essay is kind of my take on, I guess, looking at the chivalric ideals in those romances, and to say something about them.
That's awesome. I love the ideas you put about being noble to become a knight. It was very inspiring for me when I was of course we're always studying everything, but it was again something you don't find anywhere else. It was just great ideas. How was studying in Iceland?
I enjoyed that quite a lot. Yeah, Iceland certainly is a magical place in its own ways. I mean, I'm glad to be back in the States. As much as I liked certain things about Iceland, I don't think I could live there forever.
Yeah, I know. Like they avoid construction for ley lines and whatnot.
Well, I mean, I guess that's one of the charming things about it. But no, there's like some of the other things are. Well, first off, it's extremely small. I mean, that's both a good and bad thing. And for many things, another example would be for Iceland is, yeah, I found like, I just don't like the trees there. Yeah, every time I'm there, and I did visit again recently, like the trees just feel wrong to me. There's nowhere in Iceland where like, I mean, like the trees really feel right to me.
Interesting. I love your picture smoking a cigar by the volcano. I think that's one of the most badass pictures I've ever seen. How was that?
Okay, that was quite an experience. Okay, I remember and particularly that was, yeah, getting to see that particular volcano. That was wonderfully good timing because it went through a lot of evolutionary phases, that particular volcanic eruption. And I got to see it at what I consider one of the best ones, where it was doing the fire geyser mode. So it was like basically it was like a big geyser of lava that would erupt like every 5 to 10 minutes.
I imagine that's got to be hot, or
well, I mean, if you were close to it, it was still incredibly far away. The closest viewing point was still extremely far away from the thing.
And was there a lot of destruction from that, or do you know?
No, the eruptions in 2021 they were far away from anything, any like settlements, and they never proved to be much of a threat to any infrastructure or anything else. So, like in 2021, it was the wonderful tourist eruption everyone needed to do, and the volcanoes fit the bill quite well. But now, I guess that eruption eventually stopped, and now they're getting new eruptions in Iceland, and those are less fun because they're threatening they're threatening infrastructure, and they've caused some damage to Grindavik, and the amount of lava flow that comes out is so much you don't want to be anywhere near them. But I think those have been on and off for quite a while. I think they may currently be off at the moment of this recording, but I'm not sure. There's still the possibility at any moment they'll finally get an eruption that will destroy like the Blue Lagoon or a very important power plant in the area, or like all of Grindavik. That still remains a possibility.
And I would imagine more so since, as you mentioned, it's small. Yeah. How are winters in Iceland today?
Yeah, winters. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that was mostly near Reykjavik, or in Reykjavik during the winters. So it's a maritime northern climate, which winters some of them means a ridiculous amount of wind and then a lot of precipitation. Which is, if it doesn't get too cold, then there's a lot of rain. If it does get cold enough, there can be a lot of snow. But the wind is the worst part. Yes, it's the completely relentless wind during the winter, high winds during the winters. And then, of course, it's much darker than, like, you only get a couple hours of daylight each day.
That's got to be weird. That's hard to imagine. I've seen videos, of course. How spiritual was it to be able to go to Iceland? Was that any significance for you?
Okay, I would say, I guess spiritual a bit in a little ways, but I would say it's not something that for me was like an endless wellspring of spiritual inspiration. I think the amount of spiritual inspiration I got out of it was probably less than you might guess at first. I guess a lot of American Alcitrue probably think they will find Iceland extremely inspiring, and I guess it can be if you don't visit it for too long. But then other people do like. I guess it depends on maybe how you connect with the nature and certain things. If you really connect with the nature there, I can see that being very inspiring. And it's of course very different from the States. And then the other thing is some American Alcitrue, maybe they imagine that the practice of Icelandic Alcitrue is going to be a great inspiration to their own practices. Most everyone I know of, yeah, they don't find this a great inspiration. Icelandic Alcitrue does not. It rarely, if ever, matches anyone's expectations of what they think Icelandic Alcitrue is like.
So over romanticized, yeah.
Yes.
So what do you mean about the trees being so different? Are they like not large or not very many trees? Or I'm just trying to imagine.
Yeah, in many ways, they're not very large. And a lot of the species are very different. Like they have birches, and yeah, those might be most familiar looking. Even their various pine trees, that I find they look different from the pine trees I've seen here. And but yeah, I don't know whether it's I'm accustomed to the trees here in Pennsylvania, or like I always find the energy of the Icelandic trees to be too different.
Interesting. Austin, forget to say something.
Yeah, where in Pennsylvania? You don't have to give this specific. Just are you near like Allentown, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg? Pittsburgh. Okay, yes. I'm near Harrisburg. I'm actually in Lancaster County.
Okay.
So the Susquehanna Valley is what we're called. That's pretty cool. It's nice to know that there's another Pennsylvania person out there.
Yeah, because there's gatherings on the East Coast for heathen practices. Yeah. So those are more profound than in Iceland, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah, certainly. Yeah, the practices are very different. Yeah, and the gatherings are different. Yeah, I think I don't know if someone decided they didn't like any of the American heathen gatherings. I don't know, maybe they would like the Icelandic style. But if you're familiar with the various American gatherings and you really like them, then you're not going to find. I don't think you'll find anything like that in Iceland.
What's the difference?
Let's see. Okay, I would say it's very difficult to describe this in a way that's that I feel wouldn't be overly critical of the Icelanders. I guess they're just very different. This has to do with, I think this is partly out of the whole European approach and attitude toward religion is so very different from what we think of around religion in America. But like, if you think, it's just I don't want. As I said, I'm struggling to come up with a way that isn't going to sound overly critical of, religion. The idea of religion just means completely different things to the Icelanders, and it doesn't really match what any Americans think of religion. And so Icelandic Alcitrue seems to reflect that for the most part.
How long did it take you to work on the American Food Arch? Or can you say?
Okay. Yes. Okay. This, I guess, it got its inspiration from a particular academic article that I'm working on, which has yet to be published. Hopefully, that's going to come out. Well, I'll not speculate when, but academic publishing can move pretty slow. But I guess the idea of about the origins of the runes and the rune names as preceding written rune staves, having been created for the purposes of like codifying an alliterative poetry system. So the core idea is that the Germanic peoples develop alliterative poetry, and this is a new thing for them, and they need a way to talk about this poetry. So that would include like, okay, how do you, so they want to talk about the sounds they're using in the alliteration. And the only way to talk about that is to give these sounds names. So in my view, that's the inspiration they got for, this would be the motive for naming all the sounds of their language. And then of course, codifying them and putting them in an order. And then they would, of course, naturally enough, transmit these names through poetry. And that in my view, is why rune poems even exist to begin with. Because things like the rune poems, we don't see that in like other traditions. I've never heard of there being like a Latin alphabet poem or a Greek alphabet poem. And so, anyway, yeah, that particular, I believe it was, I think I finished the writing for that particular article first round, and maybe around-ish beginning of 2022, or late 21, early 22. And of course, naturally enough, from that article, I have the idea that that I should go then for their use in poetry, I should name the sounds of modern American English, give them names for alliterative poetry to refer to them and use that. And so finally, in beginning of 2023, I get around to taking this obvious idea from my own work. And once I'm into that, it's not too long before I decide, okay, I'll add rune staves to them, because then that opens up so many more possibilities to go with that. And so the, I guess, development of the American Futh Arch, that really started in earnest in early 2023, when I put together names for the sounds. And then stave forms came soon after, and then I worked with that for a little bit over a year before finally releasing the website this past March.
Very cool. And are you spending more time on your Eagles Mead website right now, or your American Futh Arch, or your Patreon? We can put all that information down below.
Okay. Let's see. Yes, with the let's see. I guess it's still a mix of them. I think they all serve different. They all serve slightly different purposes. So, I mean, I guess what you referred to as my Eagles Mead website is properly what I call my Skaldic Eagle .com website, and that's still I still will put about currently planning about maybe poetry posts roughly once a month, and they'll have like free poetry posts and other kinds of news to it. And yeah, Patreon will be exclusive. That's still being updated. That's exclusive content. Sometimes it's poetry well in advance of when it appears on the Skaldic Eagle blog. Other times it's things that will not be appearing on the Skaldic Eagle blog. Like, for instance, let's see, early material for the American Futh Arch appeared on my Patreon back in the middle of 2023. And yeah, of course, the American Futh Arch website is primarily meant to be I guess more of like a, not so much a blog, although there's a blog section to record certain kinds of news on it, but that will mostly be a introductory and informational site. And for when the online course comes out, there'll be a sales page for that. And
when are you expecting that, or do you know?
Yeah, my hope is for August sometime, or perhaps early to mid-September at the latest.
And how about writing a book for the American Futh Arch? Is that in the plans, or?
Yes.
Cool.
It's in a way, that particular book that has been in the plans for an exceedingly long time. It's only it was only when I created the American Futh Arch that I realized that the American Futh Arch had to go in that book.
Are you originally from Pennsylvania, or do you just live there?
Yes, I've grown up in Pennsylvania.
Are you a Steelers fan or an Eagles fan? Neither, right?
Well, I mean, to the extent that I ever pay attention to football, I'm a Steelers fan.
That's a good man then. Yeah, we're
But yeah,
Steeler fans too. I don't like Philly at all.
but yeah, you can't really get me to care about football too much unless the Steelers make the playoffs, and
Yeah,
it's
right.
yeah, good luck even then.
No, totally. I think football has completely changed from what it used to be. So, I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead. But it just popped in my head. I'm like, wait, is he a Steeler fan?
Yeah, no worries. So what's the in August or September? You said you were going to start the. I'm sorry, the American Food Arch
That'll be
lessons or something?
well, yes. I'm planning an online course that will it will be like teaching the American Food Arch, and it'll be very intertwined with the alliterative poetry, because I consider alliterative poetry a very useful key for teaching the American Food Arch.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's something that's very necessary as well. At first, I didn't understand, but then I started to read it, and it dawned on me, oh my God, this is important. And yeah, thank you for doing this, because I think that a lot of people will. I don't think people yet understand the importance of why you did it, but I think once they do, it'll click for them as well, because it is such a necessity.
Thank you. I think I agree. Yeah, it may well takes a little bit of time, but I'm certainly keeping at this.
I'm glad.
Yeah, this is all just the beginning. There will be I guess down the road, of course, there would be more courses involving this, and because like although this first course will deal very much with writing with the American Food Arch and its connection to alliterative poetry. I envision later courses that will involve going more about meanings of the American Food Arch runes for rune casting, and like other things like for like magical approaches to them, and like using them in magical workings. Like those are things I'm working and developing myself, or I guess kind of the way to put it. Maybe not everyone will see it this way, but I think the linguistics part of all this is easy. It's esotericism that takes a bit more work.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did you come up with the specific words for each rune? Because that had to be very precise, I'm sure.
Okay, in many cases, as much as possible, I tried to preserve the words from the existing rune names that came down from Old English. So nearly all of them are there. The ones, at least the ones that did not, in a way, become extinct words. All the ones that remained viable living words are more or less there. And then, of course, there were many other words that needed to be put in there for like new sounds or other ones. One example, I touched on this briefly early. The rune village that's in a way, and its name and its shape is partly meant to preserve elements of the Old English ER rune, especially about how it has a fair home where it lives in happiness. And then also, to some degree, aspects of Othala in some ways. Kind of the notion of like homeland.
And I mean, even ash for Gar, because the Spear of Odin's made of ash, so that definitely stays faithful.
Yes, and then of course another interesting thing to point out about the rune names is for a number of the sounds, it turns out if one wants to stick to acrophonic names, which I did absolutely as much as possible, in other words, where the name begins with the sound. For a number of these sounds, there are far less choices to pick from than you might suppose.
Like genre, I know you were having a little.
Yeah, genre is a good example. I've tried to come up with as many other words. Well, very little even starts with that sound. If you expand it to include words that have that sound in that begin a stressed syllable, there's a few more. Like like the word regime. This is probably the best example where it doesn't start the word, but it starts a stressed syllable in the word. And if I didn't have genre, I probably would have named the rune regime. And then,
and would you find that appropriate to put into a poem, since it's one of the only other words that uses that sound?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think for my American English rune poem, the line I wrote at the beginning of the genre stanza, which goes, "Genre is a regime in which zhuzh may flourish." This is, I'm quite certain, even though without checking, this is the first and only time I've alliterated on that sound in the entire time I've been writing alliterative poetry. It's that difficult to alliterate on. It is more common in rhyme, though, and it's not that it's an unusual sound in modern English. That word I just used, unusual, yeah, it's in that word. So there's a lot. Yeah, the word usual or unusual, it contains the genre sound. And there's other common words like vision, azure, treasure, measure. All of these words contain the genre sound. So it's not as if the sound is like any kind of bizarre rarity in English. Although it's fair to say it is one of the lesser common sounds, but by no means too far out there. But all of the words seem to have one thing, and all the words with this sound seem to have in common that they were not originally from Germanic languages. They all seem to have come out of French one way or another. If it weren't for the Norman conquest, I'm not sure this sound would even exist in modern English. But yeah, and that's, and genre is not the only. A couple other of the sounds they had a little trouble. There was some difficulty in there's not too many that start words. Like for instance, might consider the name ooze. See if you can come up with any other words that start with that sound. Yeah, there's not too many of those.
Sorry, I cut out for a second, but yeah, absolutely, there's not. Well, we're just about at the end of the interview here. Is there anything else you might say for parting words?
Okay, let's see. I think well, there's certainly exciting things coming up. As I mentioned with divination. I do use these for divination. I've even put them on some rune lots. I've made 4 sets for sale, and they'll be at the Beaver County Heathen Festival, which I think, depending on when you edit and air this, it may have already taken place by the time this airs. But that's coming up at the end of July, and I think yes, there's lots of interesting things coming out, getting this out into the world. And
this will probably air tomorrow. I upload it I'll upload it at work. There's a few things I'll have to cut out for YouTube, but that's pretty much it. So
okay.
If it's at the end of July, then it's coming up.
Okay, so then in that case, the end of this week. What's the Friday this week? I forget. Was it the
26th?
26th.
Because I get paid. That's the only reason why I know is because I get paid on Friday.
Yeah, so that's the July 26th, 27th, 28th Beaver County Heathen Festival here in Pennsylvania. I'll be performing some of my poetry, selling my books, American Futh Arch rune lots, and other things here.
And how much do you sell your books for? Usually.
Let's see. Okay,
Ballpark.
I guess the main books, Eagle's Mead is the hardcover, which only exists as hardcover, is $33. And the Viking Poetry for Heathen Rites, the hardcover for that, typically like $27 or $27.99.
Oh, Viking. You have some Viking stuff too. I love Viking culture.
Yes, yeah. Viking Poetry for Heathen Rites is a collection of heathen religious poetry. These are kinds of things that one, like heathen or Alcitur, might use in like various rituals. There are calls to the gods. There's story poems about tales from the mythology, things like examples of sumble toasts, even a few short ritual dramas that could be that one could like act out, for instance.
Nice. Okay. Well, we have come to the end of our time, Eric, but it's been so great talking to you. We will have a guest next week. I'm sorry, who was that, Matt? I'm sorry. Paul Friedrich? Frederick? Is that the guest next week?
I think, from my view, it looks like Matt may have frozen.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, he said Paul Friedrich, author of The Second Awakening, is next week's guest. Yeah, he had to reset his computer. So, but thank you, Eric, for coming on and telling all this great stuff. All his links will be in the description field. So if you want to go ahead and click on any of those links, you can find out more about him, and you can also order his books. I'm sure that you will give us are you on Amazon, or do you have like a website that we can go on and get your books to?
Yes, and my books are available on Amazon and other, more or less any other online retailers. And I guess my Skaldic Eagle blog, yeah, yes, yeah, the skaldiceagle.com.
Okay.
We'll have links to the books and listings for them.
Okay. So everything will be down in the description field. So again, if you want to check out anything Eric wise, or if you want to look at anything for me or for Matt Collins, everything will be in the description field. Just want to do some shameless plugs. So Eric, thank you so much for coming, and hope you have a great week. And if you want to see what he's got, just check the links in the description field. Thanks,
Yeah,
Eric.
thank you. And thank you for having me here.
Sure. Okay, guys. So, unfortunately, our guest host had to restart his computer. Co-host, I mean. So I'm just gonna do some shameless plugs, and when he comes back on, hopefully he will come back on. Then we can just go ahead and do um, the moon ritual that I was going to do, since it is the full moon tonight. So some shameless plugs that I want to do over on my wrestling podcast, which is Kurt Hennig was the best, changed my mind. There you are, Matt. I'm just gonna do some shameless plugs, so hang on a second. Um, I did tell everyone it's Paul Friedrich. I think that's how you say it. Is next week. Okay. So some shameless plugs. Head on over to Kurt Hennig was the best, changed my mind. The link will be in the description field. Episode 43 is Diamond Dallas Page versus Kurt Hennig on Monday Nitro. I am not able to promote it for stupid reasons, but that's okay. We're gonna if you want to check it out, go check it out. Excuse me. On You can either go on YouTube or on Rumble. The whole thing is on Rumble. It will be here in about 4 minutes. So usually I make sure that new episodes come on about 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So so in about like 4 minutes here, my new episode 43 is about to drop. Again, it's Kurt Hennig's match with Chris Benoit. Then next week is episode 44, and we're going to do the Kurt Hennig takes Arn Anderson's spot. And this was when he joined the Four Horsemen. Now, if you go to Rumble, you get to see and hear the some extra exclusives. So I have some exclusives going on right now. We're going to do the NWO parody. So what you'll hear on Rumble is you'll hear the original YouTube stuff. I actually I think I give my own star ratings for Money in the Bank. So you can check that out. And then if you do Rumble, you'll hear Kurt Hennig takes Arn Anderson's spot. Plus, you'll hear the NWO parody, and you'll get to hear me rant for 30 minutes about why I didn't like Arn Anderson, or Ric Flair for that matter. But that's all on my wrestling page. That's what's coming up for you. I also am going to do what Pro Wrestling Talk we started to do, which is the first hour on Pro Wrestling Talk, which is 8 p.m. on Saturday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to do the first hour on YouTube and then the second hour just on Rumble. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start recording myself like this on Rumble, and we're going to do clips. So I'm going to do like watch alongs to, um, for example, after Booker T's match, I can do clips of Kurt and Lex Luger on. I'll do the clips, so you'll get to see the video clips on Rumble, and then I'll do the audio for just YouTube, and I'll have to cut some out of the music, but I mean, at least you'll get the audio for YouTube, excuse me, and then the real video clips for Rumble. So if you go over to Rumble, that's the exclusive you get. I'm going to start doing a lot more things because I have a lot more leeway on Rumble than I do on YouTube. So good things in the works there, guys, for my other channels. This channel, again, we're going to have Paul Friedrich. He's the author of Second Awakening. Next week, that's Monday what is Monday?
29th.
29th. Okay,
Yeah.
for the 29th. Okay, so we're going to record that episode next week, Monday. This was just a special Sunday edition because I believe that Eirik was only available today, which is good because I have a hair appointment tomorrow. I was going to have to cancel. But it's a good thing we did it Sunday instead of Monday. So, other than that, catch us on YouTube, and we're also on Rumble as well for Black Magic Talk. If you are on Rumble for Black Magic Talk, you will get the entire episode. I do not have to edit or cut anything out. Nothing. I don't really have to cut anything out for the Rumble segment. For the YouTube segment, unfortunately, I will have to do a little bit of editing there. But hey, all good. It's still the same thing, still the same episode, but just a little bit of editing in there, but not too much. So, Matt, are you ready for our full moon ritual? Okay.
Sounds good. Absolutely.
This is our full moon rite, and you guys can either do motions or whatever you do during these moon rites. You can close your eyes or whatever you wish. So, since I'm sitting, I can't really raise my arms, but I'll try. On this powerful night of the full moon, I practice the ancient rites. Hail to thee, luminous queen of the night sky. Hail to thee, Hecate of the full moon. Tonight I honor your power. Tonight we are as one. Your beauty and power, strength and magnetism are felt within and without me. I honor the Great Mother. I honor the alluring, nurturing, and receiving power of the Divine Feminine. I bask in your light and glory. And now we're going to draw down the moon. So pretend that you can feel and see the new moon in your mind's eye. Queen of the luminous night, hear my call. We are as one. I draw in your light. I draw in your power. I feel your light shine within me. I feel your light glowing about me. I am your beauty. I am your magic. I am your wisdom. I am your compassion. I draw you in. I draw you within. We are one. And now I'm just going to give everyone a few moments just to bring in that new moon energy. You can say a little prayer to yourself, or you can say a few words to yourself, but just going to give you a few moments to say what you wish and what your intention is for till the next new moon. So go ahead and do what you need to do. Okay, and blessed be. And we'll go ahead and do the gratitudes. Goddess of the full moon, night. I thank you for your presence and your blessings. I give offerings to you in praise and gratitude. May you both be pleased and fulfilled. I give offerings and thanks to the God of the witches for your presence here. May you both be pleased and fulfilled. Blessed be. All right. Thank you, everybody. Again, if you need anything, you want to contact us on X or whatever for a tarot reading, because apparently our tarot reading was a hit. We had over 1,300 likes on our episode last week. Overall, everyone seemed to like the tarot readings that we gave each other. If you are interested in a tarot reading, contact me or Matt on X. You can direct message us or DM us or whatever you say about that. You can do that on X, and we will give you our rates, and you can decide if you want to do it on the show or off the show. We absolutely do not have to do it on the show if you don't want to. If you would like to help us with the show, you can go on our Patreon page. Again, everything will be in the description field below. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always DM us also on X. And I just want to let everyone know I do have hair. I just have it up because I didn't know what to do with my hair at this point, because I do have a hair appointment tomorrow. So I was like, I don't know, up, down. No, I'll put it up. So
Mine, however, migrated to my face.
I mean, it's not like oh no, she's bald. No, I really am not. Oh, what happened to her hair? She cut it all off. No, 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 I didn't. It's still very well here. Just to get it up off of my neck, because it is a little hot in here right now. So, but I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I hope everyone has a blessed week. And like I said, if you need to contact us, everything will be in the description field below. Don't hesitate to give us a little buzz or whatever, or DM or whatever you want to do. Just click the links in the description field, and blessed be everybody. See you, Matt.